Death is something that impacts all of us. We'll all experience it one way or another. It's inevitable. Even with the inevitability of it, very few like to acknowledge it. However, there is a slight exception, as there is a handful of people that encourage us to discuss it, perhaps even over a slice of cake.
My mum was diagnosed with bowel cancer about 8 years ago now, and she got treated with chemotherapy, and it actually went away, and she had to have an operation, and that kind of didn't work. Because of the operation, the cancer had gone into like a part of the bowel that they can't remove it from, called the peritoneum. So once it had got in there, it was terminal, and she was told she had a 1.5 years to live. And then she rapidly declined in April of 2014, and she passed away in May of 2014.
We spoke to Michael Pillett about his experience at the first ever Death Cafe meeting in Hackney in 2011.
I got to a Death Cafe. People just mill around until everyone arrives. There's a bit of kind of small talk and cups of tea and snacks in a very, the one I went to was a very English kind of cake and tea sort of vibe. And then at some point everyone just sort of sat around a table, and John Underwood, who was kind of running it, sort of did a little introduction of what it was, what we were going to do. And then there was one person there whose job was to kind of just keep things running, a bit of a moderator or facilitator sort of role. And she started by asking a couple of questions, and then people just started talking, and then it just became like a free-form sort of chat. Wasn't very structured. Conversations followed whatever people were talking about, and then someone else would then relate their own experience based on that. And there were a couple of, I think, slightly ritualised elements that we did. So there was one moment at the end where everyone got given a piece of paper and wrote down, I think, something that they wanted to do in their life, or some goal or something like that. And then everyone went and burnt it in the fire. So there was this like slightly ritualised element at the end. But that was the only thing really that was kind of structured. Everything else was just people chatting about death and dying and all of these kinds of things.
Many people have to deal with a loved one's death. Whether it's too soon or not, how people deal and grieve differs person to person. Death cafes have allowed people to talk about death, to deal with it, or just simply learn about death.
A few months down the line, probably towards a year, that's when the grieving process started, I think, for us. And that's when like the anger, the upset and the loss really kicked in. But I visit the Death Cafe, and I started going there when my mum was first diagnosed with terminal bowel cancer. So when she was first told that it was terminal, that's when I started going there. And it helps me because I deal with the process by talking about my mum and the cancer, whereas my brother doesn't. So it helps me because I go there and talk about it.
So we talked about people who died in my life. So I talked about my grandparents a little bit, how they died. And I think after it, I felt like I got something off my chest in some way that I couldn't really have defined beforehand.
Having a group of different people in a room talk about death means that there are a variety of different opinions regarding religion, life after death, and guidance by God.
What the death cafes do are quite interesting in that they're a place that you can go and talk about death that isn't a church. And I've never had that in my... I've never been religious ever. And I think the death cafe was really... What was really interesting about it to me at first was just this idea that you could go and talk about death and it was all right, and it was quite a structured way of doing it. There were people there who would help you and would give like a framework to think about this and talk about it, but not in a way that involved God. And it was the first time really that I'd seen that, so that was quite cool.
Before my mum got unwell, none of my family believed in like life after death or anything like that. But since when my mum did get unwell, she kind of turned to, you know, looking at God and things like life after death and things like that. And I think what keeps me kind of not crying every day is like knowing that there's like something else after life. You know, either like loved ones like are watching over us, or you know there is life after death. But I know everyone's opinions are different, and going to the death cafe, I hear so many different opinions of what their views are on life after death, and yeah.
Death can be an uncomfortable subject to discuss with strangers. But how do people really feel about being in a room with so much uncertainty?
When hearing about like different people's reasons for going to the death cafe, some people there like me who have like lost someone and are trying to deal with grieving, and however other people are there for other reasons, such as, you know, they're interested in finding out more about life after death, or they're scared themselves for death and want to be reassured that there is something else out there.
It was really quite strange. So I remember going and thinking that this was a fun thing to do and interesting and might be something quite nice to write about. And then as I was walking up to it, it was held in this little terraced house in Hackney, and I was just walking up the street to it, and it was... Suddenly I started to feel quite nervous in quite a strange way, because I didn't really know what this thing was going to be. So we were going to talk about death in some way, and there were going to be people there I didn't know. I didn't really know John, I just exchanged a few emails with him. And it was, yeah, so I started to feel really nervous, and then I got there, started talking to a couple of the strangers who were there as well, and we were all a bit sort of confused and joking and laughing actually about how weird it was. So it was a very strange feeling at first, but then it started, and then it just became quite nice. You know, it was quite serious, but not in a heavy way. It was just like a chat, and they brought cake, and there was cups of tea, and yeah, we just had a nice chat. So by the end, it was kind of a nice feeling, but it was strange at first, definitely.
What's most important is that death cafes help us remember our loved ones in a warm and comforting environment.
And when she got the terminal diagnosis, we were all obviously very devastated, but she was more devastated because she wasn't going to see her children grow up, not the fact that kind of she wasn't going to be here. It was more the fact that she wasn't able to see her children grow up, and she kind of really felt devastated for us three, like me, my brother and my sister. She loved Christmas time and getting presents for everyone and things like that, and especially once she got unwell, we went on loads of holidays to like make loads of memories, and my favourite holiday is when we went to Tenerife, and that was like our place and stuff, and